Right, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before we're going to argue why, why developing religious figures will be a lot more effective in dealing with environmental issues in developing countries. We have to also understand why developing countries, why the lifestyle in developing countries would be different in terms of their perspective towards the environment, towards environmental issues, and say developed countries and so on and so forth. So let's see what the status quo is really about. So developing countries still have, say, post-colonial cultures where where throughout their history of colonialism, they still have authoritarian methods in terms of their education, meaning that they would still employ, they would employ, say, values that would still be backed by religious explanations and so on and so forth. So because of this post-colonial nature, developing countries are very likely to have a predominant religious majority. So how is this going to be effective in employing religious preachers in advocating or preaching about environmental issues? Is that it's going to religious preachers will more or less have the backing of, say, a large majority of sorts, and therefore they would be more likely to comply with, say, the teachings and values of a religious preacher than, say, other individuals such as activists or experts in environment and so on and so forth. So how's this going to look like? Well, firstly, religious preachers, the mechanization for this will be that religious preachers will be preaching about the importance of preserving environments in their sermons, or perhaps in lessons in religious schools and so on and so forth. But secondly, in this case, religious preachers will also be inserting religious values regarding the importance of preserving the environment, regarding certain hadiths, or perhaps certain narratives that would give contextualization towards why this would more or less be important within that particular context. So in this case, we'll be explaining to you why, firstly, developing countries are more likely to listen to religious figures, but secondly, why religious figures will be very effective in advocating for the actualization of environmental causes. So firstly, on why they're more likely to listen to religious figures. As we have characterized to you before, these developing countries, due to their post-colonial nature, would basically have a predominant religious majority and so on and so forth. So why exactly would this be likely? Is that because of the fact that these people are still, say, religious, to say the least. There is a social hierarchy where religious figures such as muftis, pastors, imams, and so on and so forth hold high reverence in those societies. And so in this case, because of that, because of the position they hold in society, they would have a lot more. They would have a better chance at being heard by not just the society in general, but also by figures in power and so on and so forth. But secondly, because these developing countries are built upon, say, religion as being a primary force within this particular lifestyle, there's also these societies are also built upon a communal coping mechanism in which they would listen, or perhaps they would listen to religious organizations such as Nahdlatul Ulama and so on and so forth. So it's going to be more likely to be for these environmental issues to be effectively advocated by these religious figures, because these societies are already built upon the concept of holding on to one's religious values that was built upon these colonial history and so on and so forth. That is why it's going to be more likely for them to listen to religious figures. But secondly, on why religious figures would be very effective in advocating for environmental causes and the actualization that will follow suit after it. So we have to understand that the post-socialization of education will more or less be defined by yes.
How would you make sure that different religious preachers wouldn't clash over each other within the same of environment.
Then again, each religion will the point of every single religion is that they're going to teach good, and so religious clashes are very unlikely to happen because they would more or less have the same values. In this case, they would teach more or less the same values. Either way, Christians would be taught why it would more or less be within the ideals of the teachings of Jesus and so on and so forth. Muslims would be taught why it would be relevant and so on and so forth. So that's why it's still going to be effective in that case. Yes.
Okay. Why we don't rely on scientists who is seen as more convincing and competent actors to advocate for environmental issues?
We have to understand that we're talking about developing countries where religious majorities are still where there are still religious majorities, and so they're more likely to listen to preachers rather than scientists anyway, because that's more or less their source of clarity, more than scientists would actually offer in this case. So again, on why this would be effective in advocating for environmental causes, when an issue or cause has religious backing, it will be more likely for them to gain traction among those responsible for policy or decision making. There is a reason why politicians are more likely to listen to a religiously backed group rather than activists, and it's because they have the backing of someone who actually has who do have credentials in terms of influencing the society in general, rather than activists who still rely on newly introduced concepts that wouldn't necessarily have the backing of religious values and so on and so forth. So it's going to be effective in that way because it's not, but secondly, it's also going to be effective in that way because it's not just going to influence policy making, it's also going to influence how people approach their lifestyle. When people are taught that that protecting or preserving the environment would more or less be within religious values, there will be a trickle-down effect where these people would be more compelled to protect the environment, but also that religious charities would also hold priority over these issues and so on and so forth. So hence, under these reasons, we are very much proud to propose.
Sure. Let me start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Realize we live in a developing country that people won't really hear you with the only words. They only mirroring things, right? They want you to giving an act. They want you to see the act, to giving them to copy at the end of the day, right? Okay, jump to my rebuttal. They stated like because we live in the religions, we live in a developing country with having a religion. So there's because the developing country depends on those religions. So the religious leader have a chance to notice at the end of the day. We answer this is no. There is no exact measurement that they believe religion, but does them counter religious. There is something like Islam KTP. Some of us doesn't even hear the khutbah that you need to hear in the Taraweeh at the end of the day, right? You won't hear the lectures. They only repeat the same thing over and over again. Just to be real, we don't need to sugarcoating everything because we think like because there is a lot. Yes.
People who are Islam KTP are people who are rational, who are probably rational and care about science. Those are not the people that you should convince in the status quo. Is people who are conservative.
But remember, at the end of the day, you need to giving a socialization to all of the people, right? So not because you're depending on religion, it doesn't count at all because you only giving a lectures to someone like who is older because they are the someone that will really hear the religious leader at the end of the day, right? Just to be real here. They stated about weekends like searching religious value based on their religions. But you put at the end of the day, we say that you put a burden. Well, they have a lot of things to advocating people. Well, they have a lot of things when they have a lot of things problems to they share to people. You massively told them you don't giving them a real thing. You don't giving them you don't give them an example, and you just like told them, oh, you need to advocating people, and you don't give them. Tell them how to do it. You told them to search them by themselves. It's bad in yourself. So jump to my setup. What is religious? What is environmental issues that we talk about? This complex thing we need to done in this. What we've done in these current situations: global warming, El Nino, flooding, and everything. We truly see that, right? At the end of the day, when you wanted to massively say it means you do it in the big things, right? You do it as soon as possible. You don't really count it. You don't really thinking about it. Furthermore, because what you wanted to do is just do it as soon as possible. While we live in developing country, there is a lot of religion. Even there is indigenous religion. There is indigenous religions. So it never been happen about how government will do it at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, you need to advocate every religious leader to socialize them, to tell them the people, to make them tell the people about education. While there is a lot of religions in the developing country. Jumps to my arguments. First, about the important. As a state beaver, we need actual lecture, right? Hearing people give a lecture about how to treat environment, how to not to treat the environment bad, how to use reuse, reduce, and recycle over and over again. It's not effective at all because it's only a words. It's not an act. At the end of the day, the words is just like there is a acronym like masuk kuping kanan, keluar kuping kiri, yada yada yada. And at the end of the day, the environment activists will be more effective. Let me give you an example. Pandawara. Chance to notice are more likely happen in our side because we give you an actions whatever your background, you will see them, not limiting by religions, because you would because what their actions, they just give you an example, but they give you an example of how to treat environment, how to change the world, not by words, by the action. That's the goals of how it works.
Yeah.
How it works in our side of the house. We wanted to make them smart. We wanted to we want to make them smart. We want to give something like we want at the end of the day, we don't want it to be just like lectures. We want it to be like real action. So we give them like competition. So they just like how to recycle things, and example like how the Pandawara did. How Pandawara did came to every city in the Indonesia and do environmental lift. It will be more effective than the side of the house. So proud to be opposition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Lanjut.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Wait.
Stop.
Oh. If I am poor, the audacity to hear elitist, immoral, God-questioning scientists in their bubble of higher education to lecture me about how I should live my life, so proud to propose. So I think what is quite weird about the case coming from opposition is that they don't understand what is the purpose of socialization and education to begin with, is to tell people who doesn't already know something about something they should care about. Therefore, the purpose of socialization and who is the target actor of who you should educate are not people who are liberal, are not people who are within college campuses who already care about the environment, already have the knowledge within these campuses to know that caring about the environment is scientifically good. It is the people who does not have access to higher education, who are conservative, who cares about religion, and because they cannot survive within the world, they want to survive in the afterlife. These are the people that you should care about, because oftentimes they are the people who fights back against environmental policies. Just because of that, opening opposition cannot win this debate. So, two responses towards opening opposition. They talk about how we should lecture people who already care about these type of things, and people to some degree who already have this knowledge. I think what you are doing when you double down on this, you destroy self-internalized motivation. The same way when you wash dishes and then your mom tells you to wash the dishes, then you suddenly lose that internalized motivations. People have the ability, people have the self-expectation to want to care about something that comes from internalized motivation. The fact that I myself care about the environment without scientists telling, no thank you, without scientists necessarily telling me what to do, means that internalized motivation are probably going to be destroyed. Maybe you trying to question why then, when people are why people are more likely to question to listen to people who are within authority figures, for example, just figures, that self-internalized motivation is not destroyed. The destruction of self-internalized motivation only exists when you listen to scientists who does not have the sense of the same type of relatability to you, because there are people who are elitists who doesn't necessarily have who does not have the same type of experiences as you in your life. Second, let's talk about Pandawara group. Pandawara group exists not necessarily because they are scientists, because of moral justification that oftentimes comes from religious values. The conception of moral framework within literally any society oftentimes comes within religious values. For example, Christianity values. The fact that murder is bad comes from religion, not necessarily comes in like atheistic societies. So, jumping to my substantives. First, why people are more likely to opt into listening to environmental values, and second, why the actualization of environmental values are more likely to happen. But extra mechanization on top of what my PM has talked to you. I think what the process that makes socialization are going to happen are fourfold. First, figures doing khutbah in masjid, for example. Second, teachers in schools within like religious education talking about why you should care about environment and why doing so gets you salvation in the afterlife. Third, parents then, when they listen to khutbah in masjid, for example, they also force their children or teach their children to care about the environment. Fourth, I think when society in general care about the environment, they are more likely to force companies to do so in the future. No, thank you. So, to substance, why you are more likely to opt into religion? I think people still inherently listen to religious figures because they are people who have, who are within a position of authority. Why is this the case? Social cohesion and social expectation, social control within developing countries are probably quite strong because oftentimes community is their coping mechanism post colonialism. That's why, for example, the identity of community and why you should care about your own community as opposed to your individual values oftentimes from Eastern countries, developing countries, countries like China, for example, countries like Japan, countries like Indonesia, for example. Because of the social structure that is hierarchical, not flat, that's mean people who are within authority figures oftentimes have power imbalance, i.e. they have the power to dictate what society should do because oftentimes society listen to that. Second, social expectations of top-down, i.e. How certain religious figures oftentimes expect society to do something. For example, like Ustad saying that you should pray because it is a good thing to do. But yes.
Opposing this motion does not mean we ban all religious figures to advocate for environmental issue. It's still there because it's still there. Thus, cater to conservatism is still possible on our side.
Yeah, but religious figures have no incentive then to talk about environmental values maintain khutbah, for example. You have to explain why then religious figures are more likely to do so in your side. We think in our side we are going to force religious figures to do so. Or for example, there's a voluntary thing to do. Third, I think what my PM has talked to you about mass emancipation through religious values. What is the case? I think the power that religious organizations have within society, especially in developing countries, are probably still quite strong. And Muhammadiyah, for example, this is because oftentimes religious organizations are your coping mechanism within colonialism on how the idea of religion makes you, for example, still strong and wants to fight back against oppression, for example, because it is the moral thing to do. Third, but the structural narrative of religion makes people less likely to fight back against values, as opposed to in your side, rationality means people are more more likely to fight back. Why rationality is not an important metric that you should look into the debate. Panos idea the problem with rationality, it's a commodity in which you don't necessarily get to choose what type of level of intelligence you are born with. Second, the level of education that you get relies on your socio-economic condition in which you don't consent to born into as well. That's why, for example, for you to tell people that they should listen to scientists, where people don't necessarily have the rationality and understanding to understand scientists and why you should care about the environment, or the sense of relatability, because I have so different life experiences with people who get to have higher education, for example. That's why, for example, like scientists telling you to sacrifice your life for caring about the environment is something that people cannot relate to, because these people have economic surplus, therefore they can care about the environment. Poor people cannot. So, what the actualization of environmental values are more likely to exist? We think that religious communities as a voting bloc are powerful in status quo. Politicians are more likely to listen to them. But oftentimes politicians also come from religious organizations, and they oftentimes internalize those values as well. We think that on an individual level, people are more likely to adopt a green lifestyle, for example, because they have internalized those motivations. For all these reasons, we beg to propose here. Thank you.
Saya. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. While religious figures have a massive influence in many developing countries, I don't think it's a great way to mobilize them massively into delving into the environmental issue. First, let me give some in context. In our sides, we never said that we would cast aside these religious figures. In fact, they were still there. Because we cannot ignore these religious figures. They will still exist. Even the most smartest people could be religious. For example, Anies Baswedan, for example, many people can still be held accountable as religious people because they have a very religious background, and it's not limited to people who only tells things religiously in a conservative way. Oh no, there's still people who can explain things in a way like the scientist people can do. Now, here's the things. Why in the opening government sides, their case or mobilizing these people massively won't be as effective as we think. Right. Now, first, let me goes into rebuttals. They said that religious people, preachers, will be more likely to comply with this matter. But just like my rebuttal, they cannot make sure here about regarding fair belief. Now, I mean, listen here. Every religion is different. Just like how Islam told you when it's necessary, you should take over dominion over nature. But in Hindu, they told you to make sure that conservation of nature is always on the top. This is different. When this kind of things happen in their sides, they will most likely only to create more conflict between people, and not just that. In Indonesian case, they would only favor the majority. How about the minorities? People, ladies and gentlemen and panels, you don't need a group of people to burn down a forest. You only need one people to burn down the forest itself. Now, let me delve into my arguments. I think what is lacking in opening government side in here is that the status quo that we need is to socialize and educate. In our sides, we won't be limited to religious preachers, but educating and socializing people could go in many ways. Yes, please.
Then can you please specify who will educate society about the environment?
Not educate, but in many ways. You could tell a professor to teach you from the seminars, and most of the seminars are in here are more likely to be you need to apply most of these seminars, right? And when you applied it, you either skip it or comply with it, because if you actually comply it means that you actually have incentive to actually go and delving into the matters. Not just that. There are also things like competitions where you could incentive people and kids actually make an essay or quiz contest regarding environmental issue. Not just that, you are indirectly teaching them regarding environmental issue, and not only that, no please, and not only that, you can also teach them by actions. You don't need to teach people. You don't need many people to teach regarding complex matter. You just need people to give one insight about it. You only need one people to show how to actually how to actually plant an actual tree to show people that how to actually do it better. In the government side of the house, they cannot assure how they would teach this complexity to people, because in their sides they most likely would
Clarification, please.
Yes, please.
In our side, it is as simple as if you care about the environment, you get salvation in the afterlife.
Yes, but in here, my first speaker already said it. Not people are religious, and even people who are always taking a prayer. Yes, like if they are Muslim, they're taking a 5 prayers a day. But you cannot guarantee they actually taking attention due to all of those dakwah. Most of them are either asleep or just playing phones on their games. They cannot. The thing here is that they cannot guarantee they are really diving into this matter. But on our sides, they are either applicated for it and actually had an incentive to do it. This is what's wrong with them. If you mobilize everything regarding environmental issue education just into religious figures, they cannot in government side of the house, they cannot guarantee that they would do it in only in conservative way. But in our sides, these religious people, just like the government side of the house, for speaker says, they will still do good. They will still teach us good things, right? They will still teach environment, like how Islam told you to put down your trash in the right place. But in our side, all of the complex matter will still be taught too. So in our side, we still get the benefit that came from the government side, while all still had our own benefit. Is that we aren't just taking matters or regarding people that is actually religious in here, but also people who aren't that taking matters in non-religious or not actually taking attention on their religious education, religious education. Not just that. Like I said that in our sides, we can also prove things like by action. We can also teach people or socialize people in regarding environmental issue from actions. People who could volunteer to do things, and people around it can actually take an initiative. For example, they taking a volunteer to plant a mangrove tree over the seas. People who lives there can actually take an example from it, taking an instant so they can mitigate the flood if it actually happens, and indirectly it's also help the environmental issue sides. And so in our sides, not only by actions but in so many ways, religious preachers are so conservative. They only tell you what to do and what not to do and what to do. But in our sides, we doesn't just tell you what to do and what not to do, but also the complexity between your actions. What you can do to improve your current status quo, and what you can do to actually improve the well-being of your people, of your environment. Only by doing that, we can actually socialize and educate people entirely in developing countries. Because if you put it in religious people, it would lose the matter of this motion that is to socialize and educate people, everyone. Maybe that's.
We believe that the issues of environmental is justified under the idea of religious leader itself, because we believe that the idea of under the religious community also involved under the idea of emission carbon or even environmental problem that exists under status quo. For example, on how religious community open land for more grave that exists under status quo, on how building more religious status, and also religious practice that involve under the carbon emissions for example, under Bali communities, they do ngaben and also contribute towards the environmental issues. We believe this is also integrate under the idea of roles coming from religious figure to actually in solving the idea under their own religious community to actually create better environmental condition under the status quo itself. We believe that the idea of coming from opposition team on how they want to create better rationalization will not going to be manifested, because we believe that the idea of the prerequisite on how you want to educate people, that you need to actually create more relatability under your own information to begin with, right? Because the idea of developing country community society on how they oversaturated under the idea of religion value itself, right? They born and raised under the religious value and educate coming from the family school. Their school is already based on religion value itself. That's why the idea of religion is also oversaturated under their narrative itself. But second lifestyle of developing society are not like environmental friendly itself, so it's actually hard to you to actually advocate them to begin with, to actually change their lifestyle to begin with, or do bangun pohon or something like that. This is going to be worse in their side of the house, because they don't have any alternative to actually create more rationality towards all the society that exists under status quo, because we believe that people living in developing countries is on how they're conservative and saturated under the idea of religion itself. They need to actually explain to us how then the action can be manifested better in their side of the house to actually facing environmental issues. Second, the conflict between religious leaders. We don't think this is going to be happen, because the basis standard coming from moral religious leader is going to be the same but different spectrum itself, right? Even if Islam have their own standard compared to Hindu, is not going to be actually conflicting each other, because the idea of moral standard or under protecting environmental issues is going to be the same anyway at the end of the day, right? Even if it is happen, the check and balance coming from the government is going to be enough at the end of the day to actually create stability under the idea of religious leader itself. Dear of the house, even they want to actually create more advocation towards the elites coming from the politician or even scientists, but there's no alternative coming from their side of the house on how they actually cater all this conservative society that exists under the status quo itself, right? We believe that the idea under CG that we going to be the prerequisite cases coming from OG cases. That's why you need to credit our case even more under OG cases itself. We believe that religious leader under our side of the house, massive info will be on the form of we give them bigger power and voice on how they're going to be facing environmental approach under status quo itself, and give more space and seat under the parliament that exists under the status quo itself, right? Because we believe that the idea under side of the house, why this is going to be create better integration and grassroots level to prevent environmental issues in our side of the house. First, we believe that religious leader incentive to begin with and the responsibility to begin with is under the same level within the political parties, elites, influencer that exist under the status quo, even scientists itself, right? Because first, the policy making in religious leader to cater towards the religious individual will be better under our side of the house, right? Why so? Because first, the problem of religious community on how the integration that exists is only they want to listen towards the leader itself, because they're saturated in the same religious value. They share the same identity and morality towards their own leader to begin with. That's why the prerequisite of success towards the educational and socialization is on how approach towards the relatable issue. We're going to be better in our side of the house, because the authority coming from the closest figure that exists coming from the leaders, coming from the parents at the end of the day. Yes.
How could you explain about the effectivity between every? How could you explain between the effectivity between every religion? It will be worse as well as to involve the same during
At least in outside the house, all these religious leader can create better moral standard on how every society that's going to be implied under the idea of awareness towards the environmental issues. So if there's any conflict, it doesn't matter because the check and balance and status quo is already enough to begin with. But second, comparatively under opposition cases, on how the fear and tangible involvement is not going to be manifested to facing environmental issues in their self the house, right? Because the power of religious leader use religious bias and narrative that's going to be better in ourselves is going to be better to educate these people to begin with, right? On how Islam advocate cleanness and hate individual who harm the environment is on how they create a incentive to people on how they affect the psychological to begin with, right? There's sense of afraidness coming towards this individual on how they internalize everything that happened under the status quo itself, to create more rationalization to actually imply under the environmental friendly approach at the end of the day, right? Under outside the house, form of integration will be working better under the individual level and communal level at the end of the day. Individual level, we're going to be raise awareness and afraidness that manifests coming from the standard application from the religious leader will be better, because this is going to be create better rationality in outside the house, because the sense of forcing coming from religious leader will still in line under the idea of livelihood coming from the society at the end of the day, and standard morality in the religious level will be actually in line under the idea of environmental issues at the end of the day, and create more relatability under the lifestyle at the end of the day. This is also going to be force them on how all the society and the status quo will be integrated together towards to government to actually on how they create better lifestyle and actually going to be create better understanding at the end of the day. So even if the idea of scientific create better approach, we don't think it's happen based on how the prerequisite to you if you want to actually internalize all these things is on how the basis coming from the background that's going to be important. We're so proud.
Get him.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Next, first CO.
Oh, jangan lupa di upload di grupnya.
Sudah.
Oh, ya, oke. Thank you.
3, 2, 1. Environment issues is a complex issue that involve a lot of factors and a lot of solutions to literally face it. It needs actors who are understand very well to structurally and constructively explain in order to spread awareness to people in a right message and a direct way. Because this is something that we that need an effective way, because like we already face a lot of environmental issues currently without distraction such as bias or unnecessary integration to some teachings who might lead to misinterpretation or like simplistic message which are unideal in the current situation, right? We believe that socialization and education of environmental should heavily rely on environmentalists, scientists who are expert towards this, and for example like in an education institution like university, like what UNHAS already taught, make in balance, for example, right, rather than religious figure. One like I have like 3 important framing in here. Number 1, opposing this motion does not mean we ban all religious figure to advocate about environmental issue. It means they would still teach like kebersihan sebagai dari iman, encourage people to throw their rubbish in the trash can and yada 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 in our side. But when it comes to a complex issue, we are not going to rely on a religious figure because like understand the worry of this motion is about massively involved, meaning under opposite side of the house, Padista, Ustad Habib would deliver the education and socialization dominantly, which what we oppose, right? Basically, why we say that the conservatism still cater under our side, basically it's because of the value still there, right? The value of like Islam teach about kebersihan, exactly what I actually talk about when they teach about the about something that it's something that's still there in the status quo. Government need to explain why this religious figure is capable to deliver a complex issue of environmental. We don't see any analysis coming from OG or like CG. Thus, we're going to give to you 2 reasons why they are not capable. Number 1, simply they don't learn about the environment in a specific way. At best, they would only like see in a surface of the issue. That's why they only able to deliver the simple one and the intuitive one later, and help. We say that it's something that very helping, like in a grassroots movement. But if you say that it's not enough to like massively rely on them, right? And massively rely on them. Second of all, there are so many internal religious teachings. You're my bench. There are so many internal religious teachings who might involve in a message, with most of the time confusing. I'm talking about the practice of like India and making like the Sungai Ganga become dirty, right? It's something that harm the environmental, but it's in line with their value of teaching. Thus, it's very backlash the message. It's not something that's very complicated to make it integrated to one another. Let me picture it to you. When environmentalists willing to shape a company because they're damaging the earth, for example, because of creating a pollution in a hard way, it backlashes with religion values who teach to behave well, for example. When we want to create riot, demonstration as a form of pursuing changes, these religious figures unable to deliver this kind of message because it's something like backlash with their internal teachings. Well, as environmentalists, we know that this kind of internal these things is needed in status quo. This kind of internal conflict that we avoid. That's why we don't want massively rely on this religious figure. We say that religious figure would always like prioritize their religion teachings rather than environmental issue. That's why we don't think that it will be effective under their sort of house. Second of all, understand the wording of this motion again and again. It's heavily involved, meaning they would, number one, later they would become a speaker for advocacy. Number two, the issues or the message would be integrated in religious teachings that sometimes backlash to each other, right? That's why it's very harmful. But thirdly, in here, we are going to talk about religious figure in developing country. Most likely, it's problematic. I'm talking about how the perception of society in developing countries, like how they perceive Habib Rizik as the religious figure and as the aggressive religious figure. Does that mean people are likely to follow, especially those who are in a gray area, nor conservative and nor liberal either, right? Which is the most actor that we were going to cater in here, because we already talked to you that conservatism is still catered anyway because we don't ban them at all, right? But before that,
the delta in our side is at least public discussions exist that incentivize further research towards environmental movement. Because the environment is now a common goal. No compromise, no backlash, no filibusters, no counter activism. We don't rely on people's nationality to begin with, which is something that you should prioritize.
it already exists in the status quo. Thus, it's no longer an urgency under status quo itself. Okay, here. I'm going to respond several things from OG in here. They want to make a policy. They want to maximizing religious charity to move their agenda in here, right? Number one, we say that this benefit is not exclusive because we already told you that we are not banning them. It's still going to be there. But second of all, the policy that they talk about, it would better pursuing by under our side of the house, because we are going to we have the expertise like the environmentalists who are going to lobbying by a movement and more likely to get passed, because the way we give the draft regulation towards the in the parliament in a more professional way, because we can explain that in constructive way. And second of all, cater. I already talked about that, but let's move to in here, right? I think that the main benefit for them is they only characterizing society in developing country in one way, which is the conservatism one. But we say that there are two other spectrum in developing countries. Number two is the spectrum who are moderate, and the last one there is a spectrum who are not even have a religion, right? But still a part of society who need to be catered and who need to be engaged in an environmental issue. That's why we need to make the environmental education or the engagement of is to be neutral, to not going to involve in the religious. In the religious teachings, because it's sometimes very confusing, right? That's why it's very. In conclusion, I'm going to say that the proposal is only making the religious figures involved a counterproductive movement and backlash the message in other, and that's the reason why we oppose.
Thank you for that speech. Lanjut, second CG.
Ladies and gentlemen, our side, we don't limit the involvement of other actors, but we stance the fact that religious figure give more impact than towards the environmental issues that needed by this matter. Therefore, but on comparative on their side, massive impact will not happen, even if yes, no relatability, and second, no form of catalyst to motivate the society. I will explain that more on based on my teammate expert argumentations. Okay, 2 layers of rebuttals. First is coming up from the opening oppositions. They say, why not other actors, for example scientists, public figures, entertainers. Ladies and gentlemen, in terms of we are looking on public and on developing countries, we believe that the part religions is something that being the root of that areas of that country. Therefore, the sense of relatability will not going to happen under their side, because even if at the end of the day the scientists, public figures, and entertainers did successfully engaging towards this towards the environmental issues, we believe that it is not going to last long. It only going to last long as a trend at the end of the day. Secondly, about religion is not that influential. No, there are things called social perspective, means that even if they Islam KTP, they would still follow it because the for example social oppress and etc. No. Second response, no, because they will interact daily towards the speech and towards those religious figures what they want to socialize at the end of the day. Therefore, indirectly they get doctrinated by this. Second response, they need fast way to socialize and educations about environmental issues, and they also mentioned about Handawara, not limited on who it is. We say that they need long process to build their names and to build their towards society's fame at the end of the day. Therefore, it will still need long process. While you say that you need some fast way to socialize this. Next is about conflict because they different religious practice and command. No, first responded no. They will have different ummah, for example. They have different followers. Second, even if yes, but we believe that our side give more massive impact rather than the opposite, taking account that the fact that religious figures is something that exists in the country itself. Next is about no complexity to achieve the goals. How we build the interest is we promoting something that relatable. We promote something, we involving some powerful influentials which are religion figure. This is why we build more massive interest.
Okay, majority of religions promote procreation. This leads to worsening to the case of overpopulation and exacerbate environmental degradation. In your side, the advocacy will face risk of narrative tension. How do you respond to that?
I will spend that more under the substantive material. And secondly, layers of rebuttals is about they need someone who really understands why this achieved under our side. We believe that this achieved under our side because the sense of relatability that promoted by the religious figures, for example, they are incorporated daily into their lives and etc. For example, in ceramah and etc. And secondly, but religious practice does not inline, therefore they cannot advocate this matter. But at least we try to integrate the religions towards how this matter going to be catered at the end of the day. They also mentioned about atheists and etc. But ladies and gentlemen, by the majority following this socialization and education, we believe that the sense of interest itself will build at the end of the day, and under the terms that it is a trance. At the end of the day, it will become something that relatable towards themselves at the end of the day. Okay. Coming up from the characterizations from our side, we impact given by religious figures are massive to promote environment policies due to their image and nature towards within the societies. Image and nature of religion figures is perceived as good and influential, especially when it comes to religious country.
which we mean here as developing country. Religion are promoted since they are child. In fact, majority of us are Islam because our parents are. Means that this is something that planted since we are infant even. This means that something that when someone who are religious figures from coming up from our side, for example Islam, promoting the environmental issues, at the end of the day we will follow it as something called doctrinated as from the very first place, and the greater impact under our side, even with the problem that opposite throwing under that case. Compare to their side of the house, there will be no form of catalyst to motivate society. First is interest of conservative. We believe that conservative search for pahala more, for example, while oppositions haven't given solution towards this. Second response is in terms of progressive people. First case, they will follow willingly because they interest and motivated because of the trends. And secondly, even if they follow by force, there will be social stigma. Therefore, they will, at the end of the day, they will still going to follow this. Second is what is for society in developing country, what is mean for them. They still debate about how to educate society in terms of education and socialization of environmental issue. This means that they need a big and massive impact to educate and socialize this matter. This will only achieve by religion figures, as I have already explained. The capacity of a religious figure within the society, within the white society, for example, first is their stereotypes, and secondly, it is incorporated in speeches, giving example on actions, and second is within the educations, for example, children. There's also cater their argumentations about it needs complexity and etc. Why we don't need complexity when it comes to those who are, for example, conservative old people, progressive children, and all folks. We need something that is simple and relatable to them. Therefore, we don't need some complexity at the end of the day. Impact towards the socializations and educations. The capacity of we all know about the capacity of a religious figure. For example, therefore it will give much more impact towards, for example. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that speech.
So I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. OG and CG will always try to persuade you by bringing their arguments and say how under their side they're always going to be able to pull more people into their awareness. However, then what we're debating here is mostly in terms of like the sustainability or the effectivity in a way that environmental issues is something that's really urgent and needs faster approach, right? What has been clear from the very first beginning of the debate is that Arifa already told you that we still allow religious figures to exist within the education, right? However, with them interfering within the environmental issue is something that cannot be guaranteed because they don't have the background of the knowledge that scientists or influencers as environmentalist people have. Arifa has already also told you on how the several spectrum that exists within the society that needs different approaches, right? Not every individual wants to get approaches coming from religious figures, and so we say that the arguments coming from OG and CG cannot be inclusive. So I'm going to structure my speech in 3 ways. First, I'm going to do engagement towards OG, then CG, and I'll do the clashes and comparison towards OO. So several engagements towards OG then. OG told you on how there's going to be the religious clashes are least likely to happen. No, thank you. Which is, however, few responses to this then. There's a clash between the beliefs of NU and Muhammadiyah, right? Even within the religion itself, it already has clashes within the beliefs of the... No, thank you. And secondly, talking about environment itself, which is something that's very wide. People tend to have different beliefs, right? Example, whether or not it is right for you to whether it's environmentally okay for companies to constantly produce products which affects the gas emissions. There's still a lot of like debate that exists within this issue and environmental issue itself. And also, OG here also told you on how scientists don't have relatability within the society. We said that this is not true because they also have never explained to us on how like these religious figures will have some relatability that will able to like make objective and credible information in terms of like in terms of like in terms of like environmental issue, because underlying then that Arif already told you on how environmentalists or scientists are more likely to do in-depth research and also they might have the ability to like analyze the current situations that happens in the field, for example. And last but not least, OG here also told you on how like the purpose of socialization is to educate people who don't know, which is why I think it's already been clear on how Arifa has already told you why it's better for scientists or lecturers to approach, because they have this background that exists within their educational background. Yes.
Human nature is simple. If I can get two things with the price of one, why not? If I can get afterlife salvation and environmental protections at the same time, which makes people have double incentive to care about the environment, and also religion doesn't care if you are irrational to begin with.
But what's the issue here is that they never told you how they're going to make sure that these religious figures will be able to like make sure that they're going to have like credible information, credible factual information within the environmental issue, because they don't have the exact same background as any environmentalist or any scientist. Now moving on to my engagement towards CG. CG here told you on how religious leaders will have the incentives to care about the environmental issue. Now several things CG here needs to prove to you. On one, how will they assure that these religious leaders don't only rely on their concrete opinion that's going to be based on Bible or even Quran, for example. Understand that these religious leaders, religious leaders' knowledge isn't in line with environment, because most likely they graduate from the religion major, which is something that's going to be not in line with what we want in the society and what the society is mostly going to be concerned about. Secondly, how can they assure that these religious figures will always have the intentions to socialize, whether or not it is within the interest of these religious figures? Understand then, environmentalists have the interest, scientists have the interest to care about the environmental issue, right? It means that it's going to be very much bigger impacts towards under our side. Because understand how like the interest of an individual will bring you more impacts in comparatively when you only do it in terms of like the responsibility of this religion of this religious leader to make sure that people are going to follow and whatnot. Because underline that Arif already told you that there's going to be no interest that's going to exist within the religious leaders, because it's basically not what they plan to do or what they want in the first place. Now moving on to my clashes on the sustainability and the effectivity in terms of like approaching environmental issue. OG and CG here several times always tells you how they're able to like pull the people into the awareness, right? Because let's say that these religious leaders have a bunch of followers and whatnot. OG portrays how these religious figures will always be able to like drag their followers to care about the environmental issue, to make changes in terms of like reducing the global warming issue and whatnot. Even if the case coming from under their side, in terms of like influencing followers, it's not inclusive because few reasons. One, we also still have the ability to gain influencers or to gain changes even without the interference of religious figures, right? Understand that social media influencers exist, right? We're talking about Greta Thunberg, who has the ability to create such programs within the climate strikes. So if the concern coming from OG is something, it's about gaining awareness, it's still not exclusive, because these things can also exist under our side. So OO here, how did OO responded to that case? They told you on how they have the ability to create such competitions, for example like essay or even such competitions that has a correlation within the environmental issue. However, they never really further explained to you why their premise could be the winning case in this debate. However, we will still win under this debate because Arif already told you that because the alternative case on education itself is already enough. The current status quo. Understand that UNHAS itself promote environmental changes by using the necessity to plant trees as a necessity for like freshman student that entered UNHAS this year. Secondly, understand Arif already told you how the most effective way to combat environmental issue is to change the whole policy, right? That's going to be applicable within the society. Policies such as making sure that industries need to have the incentives to give additional taxes to companies who constantly produce gas emission will be the most effective way in terms of like making sure that environmental environmental issue will no longer exist under our side. The reason why changing the policy is a much more effective way is that it has an instant changes and it has a constant changes, right? It enables to give instant solution to make sure that people have to make sure that these companies or these industries will always second guess their decision in terms of like making sure that they will produce such products. So in comparison, then why then we think that our side will always be better? Because we have provided to you in such examples on how influencers, such as the social media influencers, will be able to like make sure that people will be more aware in this issue. Because what's going to happen inside government is that they will only try to like glorify the idea of like the religious leaders on how they're going to be able to like make sure that they're able to like gain people, and so we are very much proud to oppose.